Hey family, welcome back to Voice of Faith. I was blessed tremendously at an appointment earlier and I felt led to share. So, as I've shared before, actually be 41 next week and I'm embracing it. My 40s have been just amazing. A lot of difference, a lot of changes, but amazing. So I had went to check in my local imaging center for my annual mammogram, which let me remind all of the beautiful ladies, once you hit 40, it's time to start getting your mammogram. And I just encourage you to reach out to your doctor to schedule that annually. So this will be my second one, as I'm turning 41 this year. And I went to a local center that I went to last year, and I liked how they treated me. So I went back. I'm an advocate for my health and for being proactive in my health care journey. So I go in and I sign in and I mind my business, waiting to be called to check in. I also added an AI enhanced feature because I do have bigger breasts. They say they're more dense and it's harder to detect breast cancer. So breast cancer does run in my family. So I paid an extra $40 for an enhanced feature that just helps it better view through dense tissues. So it says it helps increase the incidence of earlier detection through denser breast tissue. So something that I also added this year as well is extra $40 you can add. It's an extra step for those who may have denser breasts and or who may have a family history of breast cancer and just helps with enhancing earlier detection. So I added that as well. And so I was waiting to be called up to pay 'cause I had to pay at registration. And the lady who calls me up, I recognized that she looked familiar, but I've been a nurse 11 years. I did travel nursing for 7 years. I've worked at about 3 dozen facilities, several states. So I've come across and met so many amazing people along my route. And so I'm good with remembering faces, but not so much names. So she said, "I know you." And I said, "Okay, you look familiar too." And she asked me, she said, "Did you ever work at Christiana Hospital," which I worked as a travel nurse for 7 years. "And did you ever work at Wilmington Hospital," which is part of Christiana healthcare system. And I was a float pool nurse in all of their facilities, including Wilmington. And she said, "I remember you." And the funny thing is, as a hospice nurse, I ended up helping my father transition. He became one of my patients, which is something I did not expect. However, when on his dying bed, he was an eater. And he's like, "Look, I'm not going to heaven on an empty stomach." So one of the last things he asked me for before he transitioned was, "Kiki, can I get some chitlins?" That was one of his favorite foods. My mom didn't like it, and none of us ate it, but my mom would always make it for him in the new year. Even though he transitioned in March of 2021. Um, we knew he was in multi-system organ failure. So my mom began to give him some of his favorite things, as his doctor kind of told us that it was that, his prognosis was grim. And so my mom started to entertain some of his favorite things that might have been an annual treat she would give in. So on his dying bed, he said, "Kiki, I want some chitlins." And it's funny, she said, "Was that your father who asked for chitlins?" I said, "Yes, that was him. That was one of the last meals he asked for." He was hoping to get when he was thinking, he was in denial, even in his last final moments. And he said, "When I go home," and me and my mom tried to explain to him, "The home you're going to is a spiritual home." And he was in denial, and he kept mentally preparing his palate for chitlins. But meanwhile, he was in the hospital. And if y'all know hospital food, you get the old faithful turkey sandwich. So I gave him a turkey sandwich as he was hoping for a final bowl of chitlins. But nonetheless, he asked, and this lady remembered. She too worked at Wilmington Hospital then, and she remembered me. She said, "I remember you being a powerhouse. I remember you doing, being a nurse on the COVID units, and every time I saw you, you were just a bright light. You were a powerhouse. And I was checking in, just checking in for a mammogram, a different season of my life. She's like, "What are you doing now?" And I said, "Well, the pandemic led me to hospice, which led me to end of life doula, and I now have my own business, Heart for Heaven, Heart for Heaven." She said, "Wow, I always knew that you were destined for greatness." She said, "You were just a powerhouse." And she said, "I want to follow you." She's like, "But I'm not dying, so I don't want hospice just yet." And then that led me to share about my wellness line, which I recently launched in July, and even this YouTube page, because she's a woman of faith, and she just kept just doting on me. She's like, "I've been looking for you since." She was like, "I remember you were buying a house." I told her it's been almost, this year will be 5 years since my house was built. She remembered the relationship I was in. We were headed towards marriage, and God kind of showed me that wasn't, we weren't equally yoked. But she remembered all of these specific things from encounters over 5 years ago. And it just goes to show that, people remember how you treat them. They remember, how you made them feel, even years later. You never know who's watching you walk in purpose, even when you feel unseen. So every seed of kindness, excellence, and grace that you plant matters, and it grows in ways you may never imagine. Here I am, just going for routine visit mammogram. I haven't worked for that healthcare system since 2023, when God asked me to surrender to travel nursing. And here I am on my own journey, and she's now in another phase of hers, and it blessed me greatly. She just reminded me that even when life takes you through different paths and different courses, and you run into somebody who just thinks it's just a casual, bump in, she was like, "I've been looking for you since." She's like, "I speak so highly of you. You were one of my favorite people." And I never knew that she felt so highly of me. I remember her, more her face than even name. And I remember her passing several times as I worked in that healthcare system for 7 years. But the impression that I left on her just filled my heart, because you never know, the impact you leave on people, with people. She remembers specifically, she was like, and she even said, "You're going to have a dynamite book." And I'm actually working on a book. And she just spoke life into things that are yet to come that she didn't even know I was working on. And she just reminded me of who I am. So moments where you have doubt, and moments where you forget who you are and whose you are, I hope that you are reminded. And even if you don't run into somebody, when you look in the mirror, when you, maybe sometimes you go through old mail, you go through old drawers, and you look at things that you've accomplished, things that you've been through. I was reminded that I'm sitting in answered prayers. I'm living in answered prayers from 5, 6 years ago, when she mentioned the house and she mentioned relationships. I am currently living in answered prayers. And one of them, to be my own boss, to be in purpose. And I said, one of the things I pride myself on daily, said, "God, I want to leave people better than I found them. And I want my light to shine." And she reminded me of that. Everything that I pride myself on doing and being, she reminded me that I am those things. And I've been those things for her, in her eyes, for over 5, 6 years. So be reminded. Sometimes you think it's just a casual, encounter. There's no such thing. There's no coincidence. And everybody that you meet and everything that you do leaves an impression. It leaves an impact. So I encourage you to be intentional with how you, see people, how you interact with people, how you love on people, how you care for people. Because just like I impacted her 6 years ago, she gave it right back today. So much joy, so much love, so much life that she poured back into me today. That was a much needed reminder. So I hope this message and this testimony blessed you today. Be reminded you impact others, and people remember how you treated them, remember what the impression that you left on them can last a lifetime. So thank you for tuning in today. It's been an amazing day, and I'm just excited for tomorrow. God bless. And as always, I love you, but most importantly, God loves you. Mwah.